I would say it's actually an order in transition. It's actually an order in an interregnum in which the old order is dying and the new cannot yet be born. What do I mean by that? I mean that we, for decades, had a regional security architecture which basically structurally rested on a system of bilateral US-led military alliances, the so-called hub and spoke system. The hub, the US, and the spokes, the 5 US allies in the region: South Korea, Japan, Australia, Thailand, and the Philippines. And that's basically since the 1980s up until now has been the dominant system, basically, when we talk about regional security in the area. It's not been a system that all states in the region necessarily agreed to or liked, but for the most part, they at least acquiesced to it, including China. And that has changed in 2013-14 onwards because of China under Xi Jinping essentially contesting the US-led regional security architecture, contesting in word and deed, calling for a regional security order by and for Asians, referring to the established US-led security order as a relic of the Cold War, but also indeed basically by forming new bilateral security partnerships with countries such as Pakistan, Cambodia, Laos, Iran and others, Russia of course as well, but also by forming, initiating its own multilateral security forums, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Xiangshan Forum and others. So because of this, we have essentially now an order in transition from a US-led, US-centric regional security order to which China acquiesced for decades, to now a contested regional security order, which is undergoing a transition to somewhere nobody knows where it's going. Some say we're going from Pax Americana to Pax Sinica, right? So one hegemon replaced by another hegemon. Others say we're going from a unipolar US-centric order to a bipolar one, to like a new Cold War with 2 competing blocks. And others again say, well, no, that's all not true. We're going, basically, we're moving towards a multipolar order. I don't know where we're going. The evidence, I would argue, is inconclusive at the moment. Hence my argument, we're actually in an interregnum, where the old order is dying, but the new cannot yet be born. So I would argue, first and foremost, free and open Indo-Pacific is the counter-narrative, but also in many ways counter-strategy to what Washington and its allies perceive as a Chinese-led or reorganization or transformation of the regional order in line with China's particular interests. So it's definitely a reaction to China's contestation of the regional order. It has various elements to it. There's a normative element, emphasis on liberal norms. There's also a practical element, strengthening of US alliances. There are also ideas on integrated deterrence, which draw on ideas to strengthen the military capabilities of US allies themselves in the region and US partners, so-called like-minded partners, such as countries like Singapore, for example, India. There's all that. Well, the difference is actually, if you look at it from a structural angle, they are actually not so big. They are not so major. Both are essentially exclusive visions of regional order or ideas on regional order, right? Regional order excluding China with regards to the free and open Indo-Pacific, and a regional order replacing the US with a China at the helm in the Chinese thinking. So they're both antagonistic as well, in the sense that they are directed against somebody, against a particular actor, against a particular idea of order. they are also both interestingly heavily focused on bilateral alliances, or China doesn't do alliances, or in the Chinese case, bilateral security partnerships. They both marginalize multilateral initiatives by ASEAN-centered multilateral initiatives such as the ASEAN Regional Forum, the East Asia Summit, and so on and so forth. So I would actually argue, if you look at it from that angle, they're actually both very, very similar by design. It's just that who's at the top is different. Free and Open Indo-Pacific is all about maintaining US primacy, so the US will be at the helm. China's circle of friends and China's reorganization of the regional security order in line with China's particular interests sees China at the helm. But like I said, to me, and I think this is a very, very interesting finding when you compare the two, they actually have a lot of similarities. So if you ask officials in Hanoi, in Manila, in Singapore, in Jakarta, wherever in Southeast Asia really, they will all instantly say, we don't want to make a choice. We don't want to decide between Washington or Beijing, between the US and China. Okay, so that's the rhetoric. If you look at the observable behavior, it's a bit more complicated actually. So you have a few states in the region, Cambodia and Laos on the one hand, Singapore and the Philippines on the other, who have basically cast their lot with China in the case of Cambodia and Laos, with the US in the case of the Philippines, for example, and Singapore as well, for various reasons. So they talk about not wanting to make individuals' choices, but actually, I would argue they have made these choices. But then the majority of states are actually hedging their bets. States like Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, Indonesia, they are basically sending mixed signals in all directions. They'll cooperate with China. They'll cooperate with the US. They'll cooperate also with others like with Russia, with India, with the European Union, and so on and so forth. So basically, they're trying to avoid putting all their eggs into one basket. And I would say for the majority of Southeast Asian states, that's what we can see for the time being anyway. And I think that's also something they're gonna try to, this approach they're going to try to maintain for as long as it's possible. Where do I see a possibility of this approach basically failing? For example, if there were to be an armed conflict in the Taiwan Strait, which would massively impact all states in the region, I think there would be a lot more pressure than there is now on the hedging states like Indonesia, like Vietnam and others, to kind of cast their lot to basically make a strategic choice, either you're with the states or you're with China. But who knows if this will really happen? So I would argue for the time being, I think this, for the majority of Southeast Asian states, this basically hedging approach, multi-alignment, whatever you want to call it, there are a couple of different concepts out there in the literature on international relations that you can apply to make sense of it. I think that's going to continue for the foreseeable future.